The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode 94.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so.
Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing Et in Arcadia Ego, Part 2, the season finale for the first season of Star Trek Picard. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Very well, thank you. So, before we get into things, make sure, folks, that you are subscribed to the show, whether in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. We're continuing on after this. We don't know when Star Trek Discovery is going to be starting its third season, but there's lots of great Star Trek that we'll be discussing very soon, including one of the favorite movies, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. That's coming up very soon, so you don't want to miss that. But let's talk about this one, Star Trek Picard season finale. As the episode begins, we get a recap, and something came up in my mind as we were seeing the recap of the season. Basically, why I'm not sure it ever got explained. Why did Data's portrait that he painted, called Daughter, why did it look like Soji, Daj, Sutra, Jana? Did Maddox model their look after the painting, or was there something more to it? What do you think?
I got the impression when we were watching, when they talked about that initially, that's exactly what happened. That Data had painted this image of this young woman that he called Daughter. And I don't know if that was supposed to mean then that like this is a stylized version of Lal. Yeah. From way back when or what, but kind of his impression of her or not. But I got the idea though that they took this painting and that's what they used as the basis for creating the sisters.
As they established later in the episode, they reconstructed Data's consciousness from a neuron they'd taken from B4. Yeah. And they could reconstruct all of Data's memories up to just before he died. And therefore he had the memory of this painting in there. And so presumably that was the reason they patterned that series after that painting.
Okay. Yeah. That's a decent explanation then, because I don't think they ever explicitly said it, but I think that is a good explanation. At least we can retcon that in any way. So let's talk about the episode itself. So as it begins, we have Narek who has escaped from the synths.
And by the way, I want to comment on him. I've meant to do this all series, but so Narek is a made up name that they've come up with for a Romulan, but it's also an actual place name in Earth history. Oh. Narek is a place. It's a site that is, depending on which historical borders you're using, either in Armenia or Turkey, which is where it is on a modern map. Mm-hmm. But it's the site where a doctor of the church comes from, Gregory of Narek, one of the most recent doctors of the church. And so it is a name with some historical resonances, but to me, he'll always be Derek.
Yeah, I wonder, there was an historical fact that there was a Jewish kingdom in that part of the world in the medieval ages. I wonder if that's in that area. The reason I know that is because I read this novel that Michael Chabon, who one of the executive producers, he wrote involving that kingdom and these adventurers going there. And I wonder if that was part of it.
It was a mythical kingdom, if I recall correctly. There had been a Jewish kingdom earlier on. I mean, it was in this general part of the world, but it converted to Judaism about 2,000 years ago and actually sent troops to fight in the Jewish War of the 80s-60s.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But then there was a later mythical one. I think it was mythical anyway, where there was like a question of, okay, we're going to convert to either Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Which is it going to be? And they chose Judaism.
Oh, funny. Okay. So Narek sneaks around the into the cube there, and as he sneaks in, Elnor is there with Seven, and he wonders to Seven if the XBs would be better off dead because they have no home and they don't belong anywhere. And Seven responds, "I'm an XB. Would I be better off dead?" And he says, "No, because I'd miss you," which was very sweet. Yeah. But an interesting, what is the point of life? This is a theme that will be relevant throughout this episode. Is why is life more than just about belonging somewhere and having a home? Does life still have meaning? And
they explore briefly and lightly why Seven doesn't just kill herself every day. And so it's like, wow, Martin Heidegger raises his head in this episode.
Right.
Definitely a very secular view of what life is about.
Right. And that becomes we'll have more talk of that as we go on, because that really rises to the forefront by the end. So it looks like Drusilla, I thought she got off the cube, that she beamed off the cube.
Yeah, everybody did.
But apparently
that was
she
kind
didn't.
of the point. They made it look like she didn't. It was a nice greeting from her, huh? Nice way she greeted her brother.
Yeah. I realized we never get her name. Like all we have is her undercover name, Narissa Rizzo. We never actually find out what her real name is throughout all of this.
See, I'm assuming Narissa was her actual Narek and Narissa.
Yeah, but
brother and sister. So,
and Rizzo was her
human
undercover
assumed name.
Okay, so Narek admits that he says he killed Saga the synth. We find out later on that that's not true. It's exactly what we thought it was. But he, for some reason, I'm still trying to figure out why he got away. Like, why was he sent?
I believe, and they don't do a good job explaining this, I believe that Sutra wanted to release him and frame him for the killing of Saga so that it would provide an illustration of how untrustworthy and synth killing organics are. Right. And thus she could use that to rally the other organics to her side to call the giant metal centipedes to kill everybody.
Which is kind of what Soong talks about later, where he says, you realize that, the death of your sister's death of this other synth, Saga, would be enough to rally the other synths around your cause.
Right. It's very...
And they didn't just connect the dots Battlestar Galactica wise and have Saga, but wait, she's a synth. She can just download into a new body. Death doesn't mean anything to us.
Right, unless you jab him in the eye, I guess. But yeah. So meanwhile, Soji tries to justify her actions to Picard by saying organics never gave synths any choice whether they could live or die. But of course, the Federation has only known 3 sentient synths and decided long ago that sentient synths have the right to self-determination in The Measure of the Man from TNG. That the ban, these synths act as if the ban on synths was a proactive attack on these guys, when it's really was just, all we know is that these rogue synths who are barely sentient, they need to be banned. Like, it was just it's a weird justification.
Well, but you think of it though, they're basically in an echo chamber. They don't really know anything outside of their planet except what they've heard from Soong and
Maddox.
Bruce Maddox.
Yeah.
So they don't know probably as well as they think they do the history of Data and lore and B4 and all that. They don't know the history of all this stuff going on that we know, but they're and they kind of imply that in the series about how they've basically been stuck on this planet with a couple of hermits.
Right.
Yeah, though they could do more than they do to communicate that because she's been off planet.
Yeah.
She's been interacting with other people, and what I wanted Picard to do was say, look, don't you're not simply the victims here. We've been victims too. Bunches of even though they weren't Sung style androids, bunches of androids killed bunches of us. So
Right.
this is not a one-way street here. Also, what do you think has happened with all of us since? You think we've never had groups of people that were oppressed by other groups of people? This isn't an organics versus synths thing. This is an everybody trying to survive thing. And
Right.
despite the fact that at various points in history, every group has been the downtrodden group, we've managed through the Federation and through intergalactic whatever treaties to be able to get to a modus vivendi where we can live together without genocide, without universal genocide or universal oppression. And now we just need to include you into that family as well. And it's going to involve negotiations, and it may involve wars at times, but it's not a universal organics always downtrod synths thing.
Right. Only one of us can live in this universe. They can only be one.
I was just thinking, the universe isn't big enough for the both of us.
Right. So yeah. What Picard does say is that to say you have no choice is a failure of imagination, which is fine as far as it goes, but doesn't really encapsulate. It's a bit glib, frankly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were reaching for a profound statement, but it doesn't really encapsulate the best argument here.
And there's a lot to live for on this planet. I mean, they have color-changing butterflies.
Yes, well, also the synthetic ones, but still, they're really cool. So Narek tells Drusilla that he wants to use the grenades that he finds on the cube, to destroy the ship-killing flowers so they can't stop the Romulan fleet, although there's only 15 of those and 218 ships. Nevertheless, he tells Drusilla he wants her to stay behind to bring the weapons system of the cube online, which raises an interesting question. That the cube plays no part in the forthcoming battle with even from 7.
It's one of the first of the fake outs in this episode that are kind of irritating, where you've got these, you got this big cube that you think they should be able to get flying and do all kinds of damage and everything, and they just completely fake it out.
It sits on the sideline the entire time, even shooting from the surface. It should do something. I felt a little disappointed.
Dramatically, they promise the viewer that the cube is going to play a role,
right?
But then it doesn't. And the real reason that they have this whole cube subplot is to let 7 of 9 kill Drusilla. That's really what's happening here.
Yeah,
supposedly.
Yes, because if this were Star Wars, she would survive the fall down the big.
Well, I mean, first of all, we know she can beam out. Secondly, as you always like to say, Jimmy, no body, not dead.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's the other thing that happens is Narek reveals he was always the family disgrace. He was the Zatvash washout, apparently, and she says their parents died for this. So, interesting little bit of reveal at the end of this. And then as Narek leaves the cube, we see Elnor follow him out. So Elnor realized he was there and is following him. Meanwhile, this was a bit of a fun scene. Rios and Rafi have this tool from the synths that they're going to use to make the impossible repair that Rios says for the ship. And they had to use their imagination, so it's a whiz-bang imagination tool. At this point, I said to myself, they should use this tool to fix Picard. I mean, because this tool is apparently a sonic screwdriver that can fix anything, just waving it over stuff.
Well, but you would assume is a synth device, it can only work on non-organic things.
Yeah,
like the ship.
But like a sonic screwdriver, it has a point and think interface, so it's exactly that.
Yeah,
right. It's essentially.
Which, by the way, we will never see this device again in the coming seasons.
No, because it would fix everything all the time, everywhere. Like if it could, it would remove all drama from the show. It's a drama killing device. So we get a little bit more. We see Agnes again. She's planning on doing something other than help the synths, even though that she kind of said that at the end of the last episode. So we knew she's planning to betray them in favor of the organics.
And this was interesting because she totally faked out Sutra at the end of the previous episode, even though she was presumably measuring her pupil dilation and stuff as a lie detector.
Yeah.
And I love the way that, even though she uses a slightly off color word, I love the way that she is psyching herself up for the betrayal, because she's just been talking to Dr. Alton Sung, who is referred to her as the mother of these synths. And then he walks out of the room, and Agnes, who has confidence issues, says to herself, "You can do this." And then she says, "I'm not their mother, you a-hole."
Right.
And it's like, Alice is getting a little bit saucy here. Okay.
Yes, she's getting a little bit of a backbone.
Well, I like that how she fakes out Sung, and someone, one of the commentators I've seen online said, did she know about him? And, I don't think she necessarily would have had to. Bruce Maddox may have never mentioned a word about Sung. He may not even met Sung until after he had to go into hiding.
Right.
In the novel, there's no indication of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would be easy for her to basically, stroke his ego a little bit. Oh, he says he always said you were so great at hacking, encryption. Oh,
right.
but of course I am. Yes, absolutely. And of course she's like, I never knew you existed till we set foot on this planet. But hey, you don't need to know that.
One thing the Sung family never lacked in was ego.
Notice the fact, of course, Data looks like him, and also the computer voice that Sung is using is his voice.
Is also his voice, yes, which goes back to also the EMH, by the way, from Voyager. There seems to be a pattern.
Yeah, exactly.
So Narek shows up at La Serena, where Rafi and Rios are, and proposes to work with them to stop the synths. And he tries to convince Rafi and Rios of what the synths are planning, since they weren't there, by the way, when everything went bad, if you remember. They weren't there when the synths turned on Picard and the others. And Elnor interrupts by putting the sword to Narek's face, and gives him in Romulan the choose to live, and his I very much choose to live. I'm not like the others. I do want to live. Please, thank you.
Now, am I the only one who wanted to see what a photon torpedo would do in that close range? Oh,
yes, right.
I love that line.
I find it interesting. He then Narek gives them a lesson in Romulan mythology.
Yes,
and
around the fire.
He also.
Interesting by the campfire, yeah.
By the campfire, yeah.
He also, though, has a passing reference to before our ancestors first arrived on Vulcan. So he implies that their species was not native to either Romulus or Vulcan. That was
originally from TOS, actually, that implication.
Well, there were, back in This Side of Paradise, or it's the
Return
American
to Tomorrow
Indian episode. Return to Tomorrow.
Yep.
Well, in the American Indian episode, there is the implication that Vulcans and others had been seeded by some progenitor race.
Right.
And but this is the first time they've picked up on that in ages.
Yeah, very interesting. This. I'd love to explore that more. Those origins, and maybe that progenitor. What would they call them? The race that seeded the galaxy with life. There was the TNG did a couple episodes on that, but I would like to see that more. Yeah,
although that one was such that it implied that the seeding had occurred before the stage of sentient life.
That's true. Right. That's a different one. So, around the campfire, he tells the story of the Ganmadan, which is their apocalypse, the two sisters, the Foreteller and the Destroyer. The Foreteller will die, and the Destroyer will use a horn to summon the demons to kill everyone. And he says, history always repeats itself. So apparently the great Australian Catholic historian, what's his name? I had it. Santayana, right? Who said that was the first one to use that line.
South American.
South American. Who says history repeats itself. I think is what it was.
I was just going to say it's just more Battlestar Galactica. It's like the first verse of the Gospel of Pythia. All of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again.
Or the Wheel of Time, the Wheel of Turns.
Yeah, well, the Santayana's line was those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. I think is what he said. But
which that's a little more accurate.
Yes. We also find out, by the way, when we talk about Agnes messing with Alton and Saga, she takes Saga's other eye, the undamaged one. She rips it out of Saga's head which is a little
off camera.
Off camera. We don't have to see it. Yes, thank you. We do see the eye eventually.
She's squirming. She's just like, ugh. She's a doctor. She's a medical doctor, and she's just squeamish at pulling this eye out.
I have a feeling that most medical doctors would feel a little squeamish about pulling an eye out of a body, even out of a synth.
I don't know. Doctors are sometimes, at least surgeons are a different breed.
They are.
Yes, they are.
Around the campfire, we do actually see the nighttime electrical storms. Finally, the ones that this planet is supposed to be famous for. So the plan is to sneak the explosives into Synthville by pretending that Narek is their prisoner, Rafi and Rios, and they'll have to surrender their bags and weapons. But Rios hides the explosives in his soccer ball, which I thought he would eventually be. He's going to kick into the tower. I thought that was going to be the resolution, the antenna tower. But
I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yes. Now, when they left Synthville, they were friends with the synths. So shouldn't they wonder, or shouldn't they know what's really going on, but shouldn't they be wondering why they're being treated with hostility and suspicion as they come back? I mean, I thought that they kind of dropped no pun intended, kind of dropped the ball on that a little bit, but it's a minor.
I mean, it can be as simple as Narek shows up on their ship and tells them, by the way, I killed one of them, and that's why I'm running.
Right. So they have the Narek with them, so maybe that's why. Yeah. So Agnes uses Saga's eyeball to open the retina lock on Picard's door, which apparently they're still using retina scans in the 24th century instead of, I don't know, like full body DNA
biometrics.
Scans. Yeah. But
it looks really cool. It looks really cool though, because it's got like the little laser beams that scan,
right?
Because it's sci-fi.
So and then Alton Sung, when he comes back and finds what Agnes has done to Saga, but he sees that Saga's last memory is of Sutra stabbing her in the eye. So it was Sutra who stabbed her.
Yeah, POV.
Yes. Literally point of view. That's not a point of view I want to have. And Picard and Agnes end up, they have taken off from Synthville, and now they're at La Serena while Rafi and Rios are back in Synthville, and they're trying to stop the Romulans until Starfleet can arrive, but they also have to stop the synths from doing what they do, and so they have.
At this point, the episode fragments, and we have multiple overlapping action scenes where we're just hopping from one place to another, watching action that follows the usual dictum, or at least my usual dictum. Nothing interesting will happen until the end of the action sequence.
Yeah. Right.
Nothing that moves the plot forward. Right.
There's a couple of nice beats. We have Agnes who says, Picard takes command of the La Serena, and Agnes says, make it so. So a little bit of fan service there. Sung confronts Sutra, like we said before, and he says he understands the reasons behind her actions to give the others an emotional jolt to persuade them. But of course, reason isn't everything. I don't know.
You can't kill somebody just to give everyone else an emotional jolt. That's psychopathy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is kind of going back to the discussion from last episode between Soji and Picard about death, about killing people and balancing out the needs of the many, needs of the few, and all that.
Right. This is of course the moment when Sung kind of switches allegiances here. He realizes the problem that's going on here.
Like he's got the little zapper machine. He's got the remote control that turns him off.
Yeah, he basically turns off Sutra at the key moment, and Sutra's basically out of it. This is done. She's done. That Sutra's part in the drama is completely removed, and so it becomes all about Soji, who intercepts the bomb that gets thrown by Rios. In fact, it's not just the soccer ball. He takes the soccer ball, opens up, he takes the bomb out and throws it, which I don't know. I felt like he should have kicked the soccer ball and have it explode. But anyway.
Yeah, I agree. But once again, the bomb is yet another misdirection. Oh, yeah, we've got this super mega bomb, the super mega grenade that's going to blow everything up. And, oh, never mind. It just blows up in the sky.
Yes. And so it gets thrown away. Yeah. And Soji has to they have to convince Soji to change her mind. Seven confronts, like we mentioned, Seven confronts Narissa. They have a fight. She throws Narissa off the high place and says, "This is for you."
Yeets her or defenestrates her into a Star Wars-like reactor pit.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the Romulans arrive, and Commodore O, or now Subcommander O, or Commander O, whatever she's calling herself, as Riker says, gives an order for planetary sterilization. So it's time for Flowers Up.
Not just planetary sterilization. Pattern number 5, which means that the Romulans have at least 5 different planetary sterilization patterns.
First person, I'm more a fan of number 13, but
yeah. I always have been partial to Plan 9 from outer space.
There you go. But of course, we have to amp up the drama, and it can't be just start firing now. It's got to be get everything in place, get everything targeted, do this, and it's too late now.
Yeah, and with the 200 ships there and the Orchids coming up, I now have in my notes, big confusing mess on screen.
Yes, a la Transformers. So
with Picard zipping in the middle of it all.
Should mention there was a reference. Agnes references the Picard maneuver, which has 2 meanings in Star Trek.
Which Patrick Stewart had forgotten the original meaning of.
Yes, the in-universe meaning
stuff.
Yeah. And he mentions it was on the Stargazer, and it made the Stargazer appear to be in 2 places at once. But of course the fan understanding is Jonathan Frakes referred to that motion that they all had to do by pulling down their tunic as they sat as the Picard maneuver. So I thought that was a nice reference. In fact, Patrick Stewart says in the behind the scenes video that he in at least one take straightened his shirt as she said it. He did the pull, but they decided not to use that take.
That's funny.
Yeah. But they now decide to do something similar where they use the sonic screwdriver to make dozens and dozens and dozens of images of their ship to fake out the Romulans into thinking there's more than there actually are. And they make them look like they've just warped in. So you have that whoop, 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 whoop effect with all the fake La Serenas warping in. And this doesn't last very long because, of course, it can't. As
you shoot at them, nothing happens. So
it's kind of the whole mirrors thing. If you start smashing mirrors, the reflections disappear.
Right.
Same kind of deal.
They're just holding on until Starfleet shows up at the last second, as they always do. I do want to mention that Picard tells Soji at this point that he's going to give his life in order to change the synth's minds. He wants to sacrifice himself to show that here's an organic who's willing to sacrifice himself because he means something to her now. So there's an interesting that character moment, and this is one of the things that ends up changing her mind.
And also his brain problems are coming back.
Right. This thing is the Irumodic syndrome is killing him.
Yeah. But Soji's like, I so don't care. I'm turning on this transmitter.
Yes. And as this hole in space-time opens, these higher-level synths start to come through. We actually had some
giant evil metal centipedes.
Yeah, listeners. We got some listener feedback actually on this that I wanted to mention. We usually read that in in the next episode, but I want to mention it now because it's relevant. He said this reminded him of a movie, or I'm sorry, a video game called Mass Effect. Where that's not all important, but it has to do with evil or synths who, when a civilization reaches a certain level of development, has to wipe them out, which is very similar to this. And they look like giant metallic space squids. So he thought that was very interesting that they chose this particular imagery for it. I thought that was interesting.
What it also looked like to me was from Discovery Season 2's Future Control.
Yeah.
Which was also metal tentacle oriented. And I thought there's a connection there. They maybe should have, or maybe someday will explore that. Like maybe that was maybe what happened with Control was artificial life developed to a certain point and called in the centipedes.
Yes. Very interesting. I like you, I'm a little surprised they didn't make more of it. And I'm interested to see if they will at some point.
Yeah. Cause they want to make that connection. I think it would have been kind of an interesting thing, but of course they wouldn't do it because it wouldn't ramp up the drama. The way they want to ramp it up is it turned out that by this point, humanity had actually gotten beyond these advanced synths.
Yeah.
So these supposedly advanced synths, actually humanity could handle them. It would be like fighting the Borg was back in TNG. It was a major battle, but they could handle them.
Right.
Instead of these super mega bad guys that are, millions and billions of years older than humanity.
Right.
Yeah. So meanwhile, Starfleet arrives with acting Captain Riker in command, and he's been reactivated himself in duty. We have some interesting diplomacy happen here because Commodore O is like, we have a claim on this planet, get out of here. And he's like, actually, Picard's earlier message got through, and that supersedes yours. So we have the earlier claim on this planet, and per the Treaty of Algernon, you get out of here instead. That sets us up for a Romulans versus Federation fight. So my notes say big, huge screen mess incoming. But that's largely subverted by Picard giving a patented Picard Jeffrey Winger trust speech about that's why we're here, to save each other, and he manages to convince Soji to deactivate the transmitter, at which point the giant metal centipedes retract.
Right.
And I'm like, really? This is so if you think about it, you're a giant metal centipede, and your purpose is to wait until you're summoned to save some synthetic life that's in trouble, and then you go in and wipe out all the organics. So you've gotten the go signal, and you're partway through the wormhole you've opened up, so you can wipe out all the organics. And then the transmitter that summoned you just stops transmitting. It doesn't even send a stand down, we're good now message. It just stops transmitting. If I'm a metal centipede, my thought is the organics have shut down that transmitter. I better go in and fulfill my mission.
Right.
But instead, they just retract.
Or reopen a new wormhole.
Yeah, well, my sense is that it's the transmitter that opens the wormhole, not the synths.
But
now, why did these advanced synths not do that? Yeah. Well,
why don't they open one from their side? Yeah, I mean, they apparently have the technology. Yeah. It's that's a bit of another one of those plot holes, but
by the way, real future Riker looks a lot better than the all good things future Riker. Let's just say that he looks a lot better.
Well, I wonder if Jonathan Frakes decided when they showed his fake future Riker back in the 80s that he didn't want to end up like that in the future and had started living a little better. But we'll see. So they.
The Romulans stand down all of a sudden.
They stand down. That's why we're here to save each other. And and they stand down. Riker threatens he says, give me a reason to blast you. And they back off. And
make my day, Romulan.
When I first watched this, I was almost kind of disappointed. I wanted to see a little bit of the battle, even just, a minute or two of it. But then it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because the Federation may not be at its strongest, but it's still an intact empire, for lack of better terms, intact organization. The Romulans are still dealing with the after effects of the supernova planet being destroyed, and their whole empire being destroyed. So it kind of makes sense that maybe at this point the Federation is farther in technology than the Romulans are.
Right. Yes, or at least stronger. Like a war between the Federation and whatever remains of the Romulans would be a very bad thing for the Romulans, and so that's probably why Commodore O steps down. Or stands down. So Riker and Picard say goodbye, and just as
and Riker leaves without even leaving a ship in orbit to protect this volatile situation. I mean, how do you know some Romulans aren't going to cloak and come right back?
You only need one Romulan to come back. So
Picard's there. Everything's gonna be fine because Picard's there.
Right. Well, Picard starts to succumb to his brain thing, and Soji beams them down.
And says adieu to Riker.
Yes, he does. Yep. So Soji beams Picard and Agnes down and leaves Celestine in orbit, and he dies in the midst of them.
Yeah, and we have 19 minutes until the end of the show.
Yes.
Yeah. And at least 2 more seasons.
Right. Well,
but I mean, dramatically, we've wrapped up the major action in around 40 minutes, and we still got 20 minutes left.
Right. We know there's more to come.
Here's my thought. Of course, we would never do this on U.S. television. This just does not happen on U.S. television. That the whole idea of 3 seasons of Picard was a fake out. That this was actually the death of Picard. The whole purpose of this first season, this one season, was to close out Picard's character. And then the rest of the crew goes on to a different series. That they called, quote unquote, Picard season 2. That would have been a very interesting point to this death. However,
yeah,
this is U.S. television. We don't do that. This isn't Japanese anime where they do that all the time.
Right. They're not going to kill the golden calf on this one. The golden goose. Sorry, they're not going to kill the golden goose. Patrick Stewart.
So we have these scenes where everyone's sitting around being sad.
Meaningless scenes, it turns out.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, meaningless. These scenes end up having no emotional resonance.
I think they do. They work for me.
All right.
mean, as someone who has been through the death of a close loved one, and more than one close loved one, this is what it's like when someone dies. You sit around and you don't know exactly what to do, but you're hurting and you're sad, but you're also not totally weeping at this particular moment.
Right.
And you have these kind of awkward, trying to comfort each other, but not really sure what to do. And so Seven and Rios are talking to each other about how they both had made resolutions and then went back on them. Seven's was never kill anybody because it's what they deserved, but she's just done that to Drusilla. And so Seven obviously isn't from Texas, where he needed killing as a legitimate, just
defense
excuse for justifiable homicide.
Right.
Rios was never let another captain into his heart and then watch him die.
Another self-righteous captain, which was good.
Huh?
Another self-righteous captain into his heart. Yes.
Yeah, then we have Rafi and Elnor talking, and I really like Rafi, and when she's doing her good side, she is so great. She is so motherly, and she's being a mother to Elnor, who, of course, with absolute candor, is willing to just break down and cry.
Yes.
And these are all fine, I thought, because even though I didn't see it before the episode started, which is when I should have seen it, but I did see it 15 minutes before they actually did it, that Picard is going to go into the golem. As soon as Picard had brain problems in this episode, I said he's going into the golem.
Yeah.
And so even though we now have a Picard copy in a synth body, I would still mourn the real Picard, because the real Picard is dead.
Well, and to be fair, right after he died, they had no idea that you would assume Girardi and Soong would have done anything like this.
Well, this was kind of my point. It's not that their grief wasn't real, but that they undercut all that grief by bringing the character back in one way or another. And we could talk about from a philosophical and Catholic point of view, whether he actually is back or not. But they have these moments of grieving, and I guess that's fine, except they undercut it by. Yeah, and the audience grieving, because we know he's not really dead too, or the character's not gone forever. Since
this isn't anime, and since his name is in the title, the audience knows that he's not really dead, or not from the show's point of view.
Right.
So it's a mixed thing. I think it's legitimate to have these scenes, but they're not as strong as if there were no synth Picard now.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would compare this, just thinking of this off the top of my head, compare this to when the audience first saw Wrath of Khan at the end, when Spock dies, not knowing there's going to be a third movie where they bring him back.
Right.
I mean, that was a much more real thing for the audience to themselves grieve the loss of this beloved character. But yet we watch this and we know, like you said, we still got 15 minutes left in this episode.
And 2 more seasons.
And 2 more seasons with the name of this character. I think the character's coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about whether Picard is dead or not. I mean,
he's dead.
He's dead.
He's dead, and you just have a simulation of him.
Right. You have a machine with his consciousness, which, although to be fair, this Picard and everyone else on this show died a long time ago. The first time they transported, right, in the transporter murder machine.
No, that's ambiguous. They play that both ways.
Okay, but this is a much more clearly, like, from a real standpoint, you can't just transfer a consciousness. You can't copy it into a mechanical body and consider that to be the same person, right?
Right.
I mean, from a definitely from a Catholic standpoint, we would say no, his soul is gone. This might be a copy of the electrical impulses that made up his physical brain, and it might have the same personality and memories and everything. It's not him. It's a mechanical copy of the original person.
Right.
This is Swamp Thing. He may think he's Alex Holland, but he's really not. He's an Earth elemental that has the memories of Alex Holland.
Okay. Then let's talk about Data. I heard some fans were upset that they had euthanized Data. Was Data euthanized in this, or was Data already dead and they just turned off a machine that seemed like Data?
Data never lived. Oh, I mean,
Data was never alive.
Okay.
Yeah. This is they have, and he's not even. I mean, they can totally bring him back now if Brent Spiner wants to at some point.
Right.
All they did was take out the thumb drives. Well, he's still on those thumb drives.
Yeah. Well, he's still in every neuron in Soji's head, right?
Yeah.
They can reconstruct Data from all those neurons.
Well, this goes back to the classic, especially TNG and on trope of you can only have one copy of a piece of data.
Right.
Because there's always a joke about, like the Voyager hologram, the EMH. The only way that they could only have one copy of him. They couldn't make 500 duplicates. So all they did was they just deleted Data's files.
I don't think they even deleted them. I think they just took the thumb drives out of the machine.
They just shut off the simulation. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
Why didn't they download Data into a new body anyway? Like, why did they leave him in the simulation?
I think that this was the first golem they had.
But
so the story is that this is
they built all the other
first mind transference they've talked about.
That's it. That's the real reason. It's because they have had synth bodies before, but they haven't had mind transference before.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Correct. That was the thing that Soong was working on, because this golem, of course, was supposed to be his golem,
right?
Which they make it sound like it was this big sacrifice for him. He can just make another. He's still alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He can make a dozen of them if he wants.
Right. Keep them all in the back.
So we've kind of gone to talking about the philosophical implications of all this. We should back up and talk about what happens dramatically on the screen.
Yes.
Right.
So Picard, after our scenes of people sitting around being sad, as you do, Picard opens his eyes and he's in a sitting room, and Data's there, and Data explains that this is a massively complex quantum simulation, and they have this bonding moment where they talk to each other about their respective histories. This version of Data's consciousness, he explains, came from a neuron that was taken from Lore, and that was from shortly before. I mean, and that neuron was implanted with his memories just before he went to die, so he doesn't actually remember his own death, whereas Picard's consciousness here was taken from his neurons just after he died, so he does remember dying. They talk about their pasts. Picard says to Data that I dream about you all the time, which is true. As I've said, as someone who has lost multiple people close to me, yes, you dream about them all the time, even after they're gone. We have some interesting philosophical stuff where Picard tells Data that he regrets what happened with Data. And Data kind of turns it around on him and says, well, if you'd sacrificed yourself for me, would you regret that choice? And he says, no. And well, then why would you imagine that I would regret sacrificing my life for yours? And so we have some resolution for Picard's feelings about what happened with Data. Data is telling him, hey, no, I would make the same judgment. I'm okay with it. And then he goes all Martin Heidegger-y and wants to commit suicide and says, terminate my consciousness. When you go back, walk into the light. And he says, why, you want to die? And he says, Data says, no, I want to live, however briefly, knowing that my life is finite. And this actually goes back to the TNG two-parter Time's Arrow, where they went back to San Francisco, where Data's head had been sitting in a cave for 500 years, and they all interpreted that to mean Data dies, even though, he's a robot. Just plug in the thumb drives again, and he'll be fine.
Yep.
But he talked there in that two-parter about how he wanted to or how he'd always assumed that he would outlive everybody he knew. So he would have the Doctor Who problem, and he would eventually make new friends, but he himself would not experience mortality. And he kind of liked the idea of doing that. And here he opines to Picard wrongly that it is mortality that gives our lives meaning, which is so not true. It is not mortality that gives our lives meaning. It is love.
Yes. Yes. Which ironically is something they talk about in this very scene where Picard tells Data that my great regret is never telling you how much I loved you. And Data saying that knowing that Picard loved him forms a small but statistically significant part of my memories, which is his way of saying I love you too.
Is a high compliment.
Yes. But you're right. Yeah. Mortality forms a boundary, a bound, a border on life. But what gives that life that has borders meaning is love. You're right. Life without love is meaningless.
Mortality is what gives stories meaning because it creates drama, but it's not what gives lives meaning.
Well, it's that very much that mindset of, anything we accomplish, anything we do is because we want to produce something that's going to outlast us. Again, this is Heidegger and that kind of philosophy of, well, the only reason why you have children is because you want offspring who will live beyond your life. The only reason why you build that business, you build that building, you do this, you do that is so you have something that outlives you. It's like, no, that's not why we do that.
In fact, they say peace, love, and friendship are precious because we know they cannot endure, which is entirely false. They actually do endure beyond this life because we are not mortal. Our bodies do die here, but we exist forever.
We have an immortal soul. Our soul lasts forever.
Right. In fact, in the behind the scenes videos, the producers talk about this, and they said that the idea was to emphasize that there's no difference between synths and organics as people, and if there isn't, why should there be a difference? It's the same body, but it isn't. Picard is not. No. A synthetic body is not a human body, and Picard is not the same. And then they say once an AI thinks like us, thinks beyond us, and can feel emotion like us, what's the difference between us and them? That's what Alex Kurtzman says. And I'm like, everything.
They can't feel emotion like us. They may act like it. They may talk like it, but they're just passing a Turing test.
Yeah. I mean, there's every difference between us and them. And
it's really not no different than saying a dog has emotion. Dogs have learned behaviors. They have reactions, but a dog doesn't feel emotion the same way we do.
I think there we probably have a difference of opinion. I think dogs do have emotions, but they're on the organic side of the organic synthetic divide. And dogs actually do have souls. They have sensitive souls rather than rational souls. But I would say they're on the same side of the ontological divide as we are.
Well, okay, maybe difference of phrasing, but I would not say that a dog's emotion is the same as the emotion of a rational being like a human.
No, it's not enough to give them rights.
Yeah.
No.
Yes. A dog doesn't love the same way a human loves. That's for sure. Like a dog's love, quote unquote, is not the same kind of love.
You feed me. You give me attention. You are somebody I like.
But certainly this idea that I think it all stems from a fundamental viewpoint on the part of the producers, the writers of the only existence is the one that is in this life, that there is no eternal existence, there's no life after death.
It's definitely the human body is just a meat shell for our consciousness, katra, soul, whatever you want to call it.
That ceases, that there is no afterlife. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a fundamental difference that we have with Star Trek from our point of view.
Although Picard himself in Where Silence Has Lease, if I'm recalling the episode title correctly, it's the one where the outer space intelligence traps the next gen Enterprise and starts killing people to understand life and death.
Right.
Picard himself expresses a belief in an afterlife, although he's non-committal about what it involves.
Right. That's right. Well, something has changed between then and now for the writers for certain. Well, so Picard wakes up in the lab and he's told that your new body is normal. You don't have superpowers, which would have been a little fun to see us, Picard doing backflips down the
Well, that's to protect the drama of future seasons.
Yes.
Is that if he had superpowers, it would be like, why isn't he using them all the time?
Right.
And the idea, if heaven forbid,
Something
Patrick
happens.
Stewart dies sometime between now and the end of season 3, that they'll have an excuse why.
Right. Yes, they tell him he's not immortal. He has about the same number of years he could have expected without the brain condition, which left me thinking, so why not let him die now? Like, why did you save him then?
Right. I know. If you're not going to give him a reasonable number of new years, I mean, why are you making these choices for him?
Right.
Put him in a body and let him make the choices for himself.
Yes.
If he doesn't want superpowers, turn off the superpowers. If he doesn't want an extra long life, turn off the extra long life.
Just make it like a car. You can buy one, a body with better options.
Right. Well, so something is going to kill him. It could be this thing in his head now, or it could be it'll be something else later. So why? Yeah. Why? It seemed it's an arbitrary decision, but it's just they have to do it to continue.
And if they're saying, he's going to have a normal life, normal lifespan. So that's what, even with, Starfleet technology at the time, medical technology at the time, where he's still pretty spry at, 92 or 94 years old or whatever they said he was.
Yeah.
But maybe another 20 years.
Yeah. He said I was hoping for 10, maybe 20. So.
No, I mean, beyond
that could mean
his normal
beyond
lifespan.
what would be natural.
Oh, okay.
Let's say the average lifespan at that point is 120 years.
Yeah.
Which I think is what McCoy got up to.
I think he was 140. They said, but he was quite elderly. But yeah,
he was. Yeah.
So we end with Data in the simulation, listening to Blue Skies, sipping brandy. By the way, sung by
wearing a smoking jacket.
Very nice smoking jacket. The Blue Skies was sung by Issa Briones, the actress who plays Soji. Because she's had two major acting jobs. She was in Hamilton in the touring company as Peggy, and she was in this role. So she has the singing chops, and they identified her early on that they wanted, like the composer wanted her to do the singing, which is fun.
That's cool.
So this is a visual callback with the smoking jacket, and he has a snifter too.
Yes.
And this is a visual callback to All Good Things,
Right?
The TNG finale, where he was a professor with the Lucasian chair at Cambridge or Oxford, whichever one it is, the same chair that Isaac Newton and Stephen Hawking had.
Right.
And he's in that episode also. He's like wearing the smoking jacket in his library. He's got the snifter, I think, and he's relaxing. And so this is a visual callback and a reminder that all good things must come to an end.
Right. And we see TNG Picard with him, a simulation of Picard in the TNG uniform, which is a nice callback. And as he dies, quote unquote, he ages visually.
Oh, he's got this achy corpse look.
Yes. And luckily they let him disappear altogether before we get to the skull phase or whatever they're going to do there.
We fade to stars.
Fade to stars. That's right.
Well, and then we have almost kind of like a eulogy as Picard is pulling out the thumb drives.
Yes.
It's like like they're doing a funeral there at the computer.
Yeah. Picard saying goodbye.
Thumb drives.
Yeah. Although he does quote from Shakespeare's The Tempest. We are such stuff as dreams are made on. That's the Tempest. And we mentioned, we talked about whether this was euthanizing Data, in which we agreed that it can't really be euthanasia. And so then we go to the end. We're on La Serena, where the crew is there.
Yeah, the crew's relaxing. Rios kisses a murderer. Rafi and Seven are playing that game from Voyager.
Calto. Yep.
Calto.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. They've
learned the synth ban has been lifted
because Picard is now a synth, and therefore we have to, which is the whole point of Picard being in the Golem body, was so now we can lift the synth ban because we can't turn off Picard. He's a treasure for the Federation.
Sure.
And Soji is going with them, which is interesting that they're going on to new adventures. Soji has decided to travel with them for whatever reason, and so the whole crew is there, and they end up with, of course, engage. Picard saying engage as they leave. And that's where we end. So so before we move on we want to talk a little bit about the season as a whole and some listener feedback. Do you have any last thoughts on this particular episode?
I'm going to say it again. Narek and Narissa are not dead. They will come back next season.
Right.
Mark my word on that. No body. They're not dead. And actually, we don't even know what happened to Narek.
Yeah, he just sort of disappears.
He just kind of disappeared after the fight scene where they're trying to blow up the transmitter.
Yep.
And then someone I saw online mentioned, and it's actually clear when you look at it, the bridge that Riker is on is just the Discovery Bridge redressed.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So they just, I mean, which makes sense. They've got this set sitting there. It's much easier to put up new panels and new set design than it is to build a whole new set for 5 minutes of scene.
In fact, they filmed it during the filming of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, which is interesting.
Oh, sure.
They took some time out
where they weren't using the set.
Yeah.
Probably had one day they weren't using the set, went in there, redressed it, shot it, put everything back, and
that's right.
No big deal.
That's right.
So Data has a line in his Martin Heidegger. By the way, Martin Heidegger was an existentialist philosopher in the 20th century who had links to the Nazis and also did a lot of work on the concept of suicide. But a
thoroughly pleasant fellow as a whole.
Yeah. Data has this line about a butterfly that lives forever is not really a butterfly. And I'm like, no, it's a super awesome butterfly. Why don't you want to be one of those?
It's the really cool holographic butterflies they've got flying around. I want one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would like a human being that doesn't die is not really a human being. No, it's an awesome superhuman. Let's be that.
Right. Just download.
There were no the Borg were really pretty irrelevant.
Yes. I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
And the octet of stars must have been created by the centipedes, not the victim race. So it was like a giant sign in space for synthetic life to come here and learn that we'll help you out.
Right.
And it just happened to get found by organics first, who came and couldn't handle the admonition.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. I did forget to mention that. I wanted to mention that the Borg ended up being sort of, I thought they were going to be a key part of this whole synth question, but they ended up really being irrelevant to it and just kind of forgotten on the sidelines at the end of all this.
Like the cube at the end.
Yeah, it's very strange. Very good. So let's, I got a couple bits more feedback from Les Hammer, left a comment on our website on at Arcadia Ego Part 1. Says, regarding the Vulcan mind meld with a synth, at first I thought that was odd too, until I remember that Spock did a mind meld with, Nomad, which was basically a computer.
In the Changeling.
Yep.
Well, that's right.
So apparently it's been long established you can meld with the computers.
Apparently now vice versa.
Yes. Caligari Marte writes on YouTube, I was rather intrigued by the fancy visual of the Borg cube having landed on that planet, especially since it reminded me of something. And quotes from the Book of Revelations, chapter 21. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. The city is laid out as a square, and the length is as great as its breadth. So the New Jerusalem's a heaven, is a cube.
There you go. We now know what St. John saw in the Book of Revelation. It was a Borg cube.
I think some Borg propagandists might want you to think that. I'm not so sure.
And then Kelly Brown writes on Facebook, I was mostly happy with this episode, except for how obvious that Gold Soji was evil. The second I saw her walk into frame, I called out evil. She might as well have been wearing a t-shirt saying kill all humans. They could have made it a little less obvious, which would make the reveal of what her plans were more surprising. It was so bad that my niece, who's 5, watched just a little of the episode, and after about a minute of Gold Soji being there, said, she's bad. And she says, as for the rest of the show, I'm on Team Zat Vash. They've been proven to be right about the synths.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, at the end in Arcadia Ego Part 1, I was like, okay, I'm on the side of the Romulans. Wipe them all out.
That's right. They were trying to kill us all. They were trying to commit a super genocide of all organics. So thank you for the feedback. Let's talk a little bit about the season as a whole. What is your opinion, just in a broad overview? How do you feel about Picard season 1 as a whole? Father Corey?
Best Star Trek first season ever. As a whole, I enjoyed it. I mean, there weren't any episodes that any of us, I think, really looked at and said, this was just a stinker of an episode.
Right.
And we say that all the time with Doctor Who. It's like, well, like the last season of Doctor Who, it's like, it was a pretty good season, although there was 2 episodes where you just kind of went, you really don't have that here. The writing as a whole was pretty good. The episodes were pretty good. Kind of the whole storyline, now that we've finished it up, I'm not as happy with the conclusion in this episode with Colin Picard and all that. That was all leading to that point. But as a whole, I enjoyed the season, and I think it was, like I said, the first good first season of a Star Trek series so far.
That's an interesting idea. Jimmy?
I was going to say least annoying Star Trek in recent memory. If going into it, but without the final episode, I probably would rank it out of 10 as maybe an 8, maybe an 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the final episode, I'd rank it probably a 7.5.
That does bring it down a bit in your estimation. For all the reasons you gave.
Yeah. Not that I hated the final episode. It just, there are bunches of plot holes here, and I don't find the end as profound and moving and as they want me to, and things like that. It's not a terrible episode, but it does, I think, bring things down, a half a point to a point.
So I agree with you, Father Corey, that this is probably the best first season of a Star Trek series. I think it accomplished most of what they wanted to do with this, which was to bring back Picard in a 21st century, 2020 way, to give that sort of that sense. I think they don't quite, as we've just mentioned, it doesn't quite carry all the promises of everything they brought up, including the loss of the Borg cube line. There's a couple of narrative lines, plot lines that I felt like didn't get what they deserved, but overall, I enjoyed it. I like almost all the characters, or at least our main characters. I think Rios is great. Rafi is great. I enjoyed Elnor's innocence. I think Agnes does she's a great little paradox of the sheep who's got a wolf inside going on. I'm intrigued by Soji. I really like the actress Issa Briones. I'm looking forward to seeing what else she does besides Star Trek, because I think she's interesting. And of course Patrick Stewart. Yep.
I would have to rewatch it and give it some time to say, do I think it's the best first season ever? I would say it's the best first season since the original series. But it's a question in my mind, even though they're kind of two very different animals, because this is a 10-hour movie and the original was 20-something in standalone episodes. But I think I'd want to do some evaluating to say, well, maybe that first season of the original series would be as good or better.
Okay.
That's fair enough. I mean, I haven't, as I've said before, I haven't seen much of TOS. So I'm obviously learning more about it as we go along. But
yeah,
let's put it this way, of the TNG / Enterprise / Discovery series, setting aside TOS, I would say this is the best.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you guys think? How did Patrick Stewart do coming back to this character that he originally didn't want to come back to when they first approached him, and had to be convinced to come back to, and they only did because Picard was different? How did you feel about Patrick Stewart and in playing Picard in this season?
It's funny. I almost kind of feel he had to grow back into the character.
Yeah. And
part of that was the development of the character from this basically beaten down recluse that he had become into, once again, the bold Captain Picard or Admiral Picard retired,
Yeah.
But I kind of felt like he had to almost grow back into the character as well.
Interesting. Jimmy?
I thought he did fine. There are aspects of his performance, some of which are age related, that I wish they could have adjusted a little bit more. But I thought he did fine.
I like the fact that and Father Gray, as you kind of referenced, I like how as the season went along, you could see physical differences in Picard, in how he held himself and how the way he did things. He was very much a stooped over old man in that first episode, and by the end, he was much more the old, more vital Picard that we remember. Yeah. I mean, obviously
he was just faking it.
Yes,
exactly.
That's what actors do.
Yes, right. No, but good acting on his part. Are there any characters from this season that you particularly disliked or particularly liked? But let's start with the dislike, because that's fun.
Drusilla.
That you wish we didn't have at all.
Creepy sister Narissa. Yeah, I'm there with that.
Yeah. I felt like Narek, it could have been better. I'm not sure the actor really pulls it off for me. He's a little too like whiny Space Twilight puppy. Vampire. What was that?
Space puppy.
Yeah. I don't know. I was a little not so hot on him either. I liked Hugh. I was genuinely sad to have to lose Hugh in this season. But I really liked seeing him come back.
Seven was great.
Seven was great. I loved how Seven has developed as a character.
Exactly.
And Rios, I really enjoyed Rios too.
Actually, by extension of Rios, I was disappointed at least one of the holograms wasn't there on the bridge at the closing scene.
That's true.
I love the holograms. I thought those were the winning characters there.
Yeah, that's true.
I like Rios. I like the holograms. I like Agnes Girardi, except for that whole murdery thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's still unresolved at this point.
She's still a murderer.
But as a person, I like her.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Other than that, I mean, I'm trying to think of minor characters. The one character that is the real standout for me that I just love is Rafi. I think Rafi is awesome.
Yes. I think
more next season, more Rafi, please.
She's so unlike any other Starfleet officer that we've encountered, in all these years. I really enjoy her portrayal in this. Yeah.
We've forgot about two characters, Laris and Javon.
Oh yeah, no, more of them.
I love
too.
Those two.
Oh,
they're
yeah,
awesome. Especially Laris.
They got to bring. Yeah,
you take that one with you.
They got to bring her back
as a couple.
Yeah,
they do.
I did see that actress recently in a movie, The Foreigner, which was a Jackie Chan, Pierce Brosnan movie about the IRA, and she was really good in that. So I really want to see that actress again in this. Yeah, that was really good. What do you guys think of Issa Briones? The fact that she's staying on as Soji, continuing on. Are you happy with that? How do you think she did? What do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how they redevelop the character because, of course, she was fairly comfortable in her skin as Soji, the human, and now all of a sudden she's Soji, the android, and she got very stiff and, wouldn't call him anything other than Picard.
Right.
And I want to see if they're going to do the same thing with her that they did with Raffi, where when Picard first picked up Raffi, it was, basically, I'm going to shoot you unless you turn around.
Right.
And calling him Picard to then JL. So I wonder if they're going to develop kind of more of that human side again of Soji in the next season.
And father-daughter relationship even.
Yep.
Now that they're the same.
I'm not wild about Soji at this point.
Yeah.
It was easy to sympathize with her early on when she didn't know what she was and when she was vulnerable. But she gets all like genocide-y. At the end, and I'm not down with that. So great. I'm glad you sent the space centipedes back, but that's not enough to make me like you now.
Well, it's like Agnes, right? We get the murdery one and the genocide one, and we're all okay with that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the themes from the season. And in fact, the producers, the actors have all kind of said that there were two basic themes that they were talking about. The loss of trust in authority figures we once thought were infallible, and the loss of trust in institutions that don't live up to their ideals, like Starfleet and the Federation. What do you think about those as themes for this season that they've offered, and which really make it different from, well, at least from TNG, although DS9 sort of started looking at that.
So I guess what they're saying is Star Trek writers have finally caught up with Watergate.
Apparently. Well, that's the funny thing is as if this was a new development in 2020.
Yeah. I think this is where people rightfully criticize how Picard, even again, for being as well done as the series was and everything. And I said, I think episode 3, episode 4, that they wanted to connect to TNG. They wanted to get some of that message from TNG and the characters from TNG. But the hope from TNG and the hope from the original series, what little I've seen, is completely missing. And I think that's one of the legitimate complaints against this is there really isn't a message of hope until like the very end when, yes, Starfleet does the right thing and show up. Right. And now the synths are no longer banned in the Federation and they can go travel and all that.
That optimism. Yeah. That's missing. How about you, Jimmy?
To a degree.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what the question is at this point.
Well, the how does this fit? There's this. Well, to put it another way, it's very much a 2020 where we are suspicious of government. We're suspicious of institutions. We're suspicious. They're not living up to their ideals.
there was babble. I mean, even there was babble on the behind the scenes show and in other forms about, oh, this is somehow a statement on Brexit and this is somehow a statement on Trump, and all that's nonsense.
Right.
Because that's just actors flattering themselves and producers flattering themselves. This is, if you didn't hear them say those things, it's like, no, this is straightforward sci-fi stuff.
Right.
And it's not as optimistic as Star Trek has been on some occasions, but it's well within the realm of, what science fiction can do. It's not full on dystopia either.
Right.
So it's fairly middle of the road in terms of tone. And it's like, there have always been problems in human history, and maybe in the mid 20th century and when Star Trek was just first on the air, there was kind of a trust in American institutions here in America because we were fighting the Cold War and we were rallying together, and then 1970s, we're back to historical norm where you can't put your trust in princes, and it's been that way ever since. So I think the original ethos of trusting in institutions in Star Trek was a historical anomaly because of when the first series happened to get made. And it's not the norm in human history. So I'm utterly unimpressed with producers and actors flattering themselves, thinking this is some major political statement. It's like, welcome to adulthood, guys.
Well, even go ahead.
That reaches kind of to a longer frustration I have is, everything has to have an underlying message that's political or socioeconomic, or it's like, can't you just tell us a good story?
Well, stories that have universal human meaning that don't have to do with current events politically. Like, tell us universal stories
and frankly, this had nothing to do with current political events.
Right.
Oh,
Stop trying to link to it.
Already twisting it that way, but anyways,
that is what I find disappointing about a lot of the content is this attempt to make these connections apart from the universality of human experience and all its varieties. Let's just tell good stories and interesting stories. All right, let's end on a high note and talk a little bit about the future. Right now, as we record this, all production on everything is pretty much shut down. We don't know when Discovery is going to come out. We don't know when Lower Decks is going to come out.
This is your high note?
No. The high note is this is joy. No, but we do have that they've started writing season 2. We do know some casting information. They've said Whoopi Goldberg is going to be in it. She'll be Guinan, so Guinan will be back. It'll be interesting. Robert Picardo, who played the EMH in Voyager, is in. And there are some other casting bits that they've hinted are fans will be very excited to see. So probably bringing some other folks back from TNG or other Star Trek series, which will be interesting.
Well, and speaking of Discovery season 3, it does sound like they did complete final shooting.
Yes.
So now it's all the post-production stuff, some of which can be done remotely.
And they're doing that. Mean, the production team is at home and they're using their IMAX at home to finish the special effects.
Yeah. I mean,
and they have announced it'll be coming out in 2020. It may not be quite as early as they thought in 2020, but it'll be out this year.
The big catch is going to be if they have any, post-production shooting they need to do, reshoots or whatever. It sounds like the Lower Decks animation is still going because, of course, that kind of thing is, of course, with internet technology and supercomputers we got sitting on our desks, a lot of animation now can be done remotely. It doesn't have to be done in a central office. So they're doing a lot of that kind of work too from, so that's proceeding. It might not, again, it might still be delayed when they start talking about doing voice acting and stuff like that. But
and in fact, I've heard that the production team on Lower Decks is saying, well, we don't have live filming, so we were already doing all the animation on computers anyway, so this isn't that big of a shift in production methodology for us. Right.
And I've even heard some actors can do the looping, the ADR at home.
From home.
On their phones.
Just like podcasters. Wow.
Exactly.
Or like Shatner went for TAS.
Right.
He was on tour and he'd just go to a studio and record a few lines.
Exactly. So it's coming. It'll be here. Well, we'll have it, and we won't. Hopefully, we won't have to wait too long. But more Star Trek is coming. But until then, we have umpteen seasons of old Star Trek to enjoy as well. And you can rewatch Star Trek Picard, which I might do with my wife, who hasn't seen any of it yet. So let's wrap it up there. And we want to take a moment once again to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Justin L., George W., Aaron V., Heisha, so I hope I pronounced that right, and George S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give and either become a Patreon patron or make a one-time donation via PayPal. So that's it from us. What did you think of an Arcadia Ego Part 2 and the season as a whole? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Enterprise episode, Breaking the Ice. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom, and that's going to be a very interesting discussion. Interesting.
Yeah.
It will be. Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
To close out Picard, Jolan True, and looking forward, live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, they have life, but no one is teaching them what it's for. It's a responsibility as well as a right.